Hello, welcome to another episode of Steven's Studio. Today I'd like to talk about posture, and this is something I've thought about extensively and changed constantly in my own playing, and it's something that I feel that I have a lot of knowledge about. Posture is something violinists always deal with because there's so many different ways to play the violin, and it's important to be able to know what really works for your body and what you are really doing with your body to ensure that you have the best posture for whatever given passage you're trying to play. The important thing with posture is that there is no one set posture. You have a sort of comfortable position, but depending on the piece, the type of sound you're creating, what position you're in, things always change, what strings you're on. And it's important that your posture is comfortable and also easily adaptable based on the music. I think what's important with the basic posture is that you're not doing anything too crazy, so you're not crunching your head down, you're not raising a shoulder, and that you have a clear grip of the violin without having to do anything too crazy. People talk about how you should be able to support the violin with the left hand, and I absolutely agree with that. But I've never seen a violinist play at a very high level that doesn't have some sort of support here on the violin where they don't need the left hand to support it. It's important to be flexible but also stable with the posture. I'd like to talk about my personal journey. I started off playing the violin when I was 6 years old. I was very small and I didn't play with a shoulder rest. My teacher taught me that way, and I was actually pretty comfortable. I was much smaller, of course, and basically my shoulder was holding the violin twisted around, and it worked pretty well. But then, not too long after, maybe a year or not even, my teacher gave me a shoulder rest, and I started using that because it was pretty comfortable. And I used a shoulder rest for a very long time. Fast forward to now, I don't use a shoulder rest at all. And so this is something that took a long time to kind of realize and develop with my own playing. But what I do now is I basically hold the violin with my collarbone. The thing is, it's not like I'm just resting it there. I'm actually able to support the violin without the left hand with just the collarbone. It takes a little bit of conscious thought because what I'm essentially doing is I'm squeezing the violin here with my jaw and my chin slightly on this part, and also the collarbone is pushing up, and this sort of clamps the violin down right here, and this is what holds the violin in place. And if you just try to do that with your violin like this, it takes quite a bit of force. Nothing too crazy, but you need quite a bit of clamping force just to be able to hold it there. So what a shoulder rest does is it basically does that for you, so you don't really feel anything. What I'm doing right now, playing without, is I'm basically clamping on my own. And so it takes more conscious effort, and depending on the various different positions and bow arm placements, left hand placements, that is a constant dynamic that changes a lot of the time. But basically, I'm not too far from ever having to be able to support with just my collarbone. You need that sort of emergency exit, if you will, of being able to hold the violin in a big shift just without anything. So I experimented with so many different ways of playing the violin, especially with the shoulder rest. There's a plethora of different angles and bow angles in which you can play. And what I grew up doing was the Galamian method of basically everything's relaxed and you form a square and everything's kind of a little bit out and away from you. The Galamian method was when you have longer arms and you're bigger, you hold the violin a little bit more to your left, and you want basically full range of motion from here to here. And if you are even taller, you can experiment with having the violin even more on this side, which makes it easier to do this and keep everything basically kind of in front of you. So I played like this for a while, I played like this, but basically I had everything like the Galamian method. And if you have noticed now, I don't do that at all. In fact, I have the violin completely in front of me, and my bow arm is a little bit higher, and everything is basically within this more compact space, which causes my bow arm to be higher, because if it's here and everything's relaxed, this is the position. This is a more common violin position. What I'm doing is less common. So Aaron Rosand was one of the most important people in teaching how to play the violin without a shoulder rest. And I never studied with Aaron Rosand, but I had some friends study with him, and I learned some things. And he has a video, it's about an hour long, talking about how to play the violin. And in the first minute of the video, he talks about how to hold the violin, because violinists actually have to hold their instrument, unlike many other instruments, like the piano. And he talked about how you have to treat the violin kind of like a baby, and that there's always this dynamic of the left hand, of the collarbone, and of the chin, constantly supporting the violin whenever you're doing whatever you need to do. And how this dynamic creates a sort of live feeling when you play, of this special connection between you and the instrument that you don't have when you use the shoulder rest. And I'm not a proponent of not using the shoulder rest. I used one myself for more years than not. In fact, way more. But I've just found that what I'm doing right now, this works well, and I enjoy playing the way that I am now. I think that with my posture, it's a more personal posture, because everything is right in front of my eyes. Galamian talked about this too, with having your nose to the scroll. And it's a little funny, because if you can still do that if you're in this outer position here, but it's less personal. When you're right up here, it's much more engaged, and I have much more finer control of everything that I'm doing. Steve Rose is an example of a player who is much taller than most people as a violinist, and he plays with everything very much close to him, even though he uses a shoulder rest. So this personal feeling is something that I struggled with, because I wanted to find it. I always wanted this personal feeling, yet so many of my teachers were telling me the opposite. They were telling me that I should have everything open like this. And this is where it just comes back to the idea that there's no one way to play the violin, and you have to do what works for you the most. What I've learned is that in this posture that I'm doing now, there's less focus on just creating a loud sound. I can still create a loud sound, but generally my sound, because I'm a little bit higher up, is more resonant and ethereal rather than deep into the string. And I personally stated in a musical soliloquy that I like this type of sound more, even though I came from the Galamian school of playing very loudly. I feel that this posture naturally just promotes a very straight bow and a big sound. But with my stature, I never felt quite comfortable with it. And whenever I got on stage, I always felt like I was out of control, because I always was trying to lift something with my right arm especially. And that's why I never felt comfortable with off the string or spiccato, especially in orchestral excerpts. In a solo piece, a spiccato section, you can kind of maneuver your way around. In an excerpt, there's no real hiding. Right. But just in that excerpt right there, Beethoven's Scherzo, I can play it with the violin kind of out here, but everything's lower and I don't have this control up here. That for some reason when I play naturally, I want to be able to control everything, and I have much finer control up here rather than just everything down there. So I'm not saying there is one correct way or the other, but I am saying that you have to find what is personal to you and what works. So I hope some of this journey was helpful, and I will see you again on the next episode.